Welcome back to Reading Java Code. We've completed Module 1, IDEs, and Module 2, file types. We're now going to talk about how to read and how to write our first Hello World program. Now, I'm going to actually do the writing, and you're just going to do the viewing, and I'm going to kind of talk you through what's happening so you'll know what the features are, the elements, and the pieces of a simple Java program. This will be your first introduction to how to read Java code and what it is doing. We'll cover packages, we'll cover a public class, and we will cover the main method with arguments. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to bring up my NetBeans IDE. Welcome back. I have my NetBeans IDE up and ready to dive into our first program. This is the world famous Hello World program that every beginning developer has to program at least once in their learning process. And typically this Hello World program is used to determine if you've installed your IDE correctly, your development environment is set up correctly. So this is a good barometer, a good test that a lot of developers use when setting up their IDEs. So let's get cracking, let's get into it. So here we go. The first thing we want to do, because we talked about project files, right? We talked about source files and we talked about class files. So here's where I'm going to show you what I mean by creating a project. And actually, I think I'm going to do this in Eclipse as well, so you can see the both variations of how to create Hello World in two different IDEs and how to read code. But anyway, here we go. I'm going to do a new project, so I click New Project. It's a Java application that I'm writing, so therefore it's already selected. I click Next. I name it, and you should give it a useful name, and I'm going to call this Hello World because it's the Hello World program. I'll use the default locations, and here is something that's very interesting. This will create that main class that contains that main method. In Eclipse, this is not done. This is something you have to code yourself. So I'm going to click Finish, so it'll bring up the source code in the project. All right, what you see here, if you look over here, here's Hello World. This is what I typed. The default package is Hello World, and this will always be in lowercase. If it's in uppercase, you will get an error. And we will talk more about error messages later, how to read them. And here is the Hello World main Java class. Now, I know I called this a source code. I know I called this a source file, but it is actually a Java class, and it is the main class, as you saw when I created the ID in the IDE. In the project creation, you saw it say main class. So, like I talked before, you see this little green arrow right here. This signifies that this is the main class or the main source file that needs to be ran to run the program if there were other files. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on over here. What we have here, we have the package, which we see right here. And you can have multiple packages, as I told you, but we won't really go into that. So just know that in NetBeans, these words here that are special words or reserved words will be in blue. And the words that you type will be in black because they're yours. So this is our package. And I'm just going to type something here so you can see it. Sometimes when you're writing a program, you have to import items. So you will see that the word import turns blue because it is a reserved word, and you can import different packages. I won't do that here, but just wanted to show that that is another element that is part of a Java program. Because typically the way Java is right now, or the NetBeans environment is, it doesn't have all the packages or import libraries imported that I would need to complete a client server or client database client application. So I would have to import some other items. So here we go. Every Java class has to have a public class in it. Why is it public? Because that way it could be seen outside of its class. If we made this private, Hello World would not be seen inside of its own self. So with that said, we got to have public class. And here's the Hello World, which we created right here. And I know this looks kind of interesting to you right here. This stands for parameters, arguments at the command line. I'm glad you asked, what does that really mean? Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our main method here. Public static void main. And whenever you use the word static, it will italicize in this method name. A static class is a static method is something that runs within itself and can be ran or seen outside of itself. Okay, it's public and it can't change. So here we go. Sorry. A string with those brackets signify an array, which we won't cover in this series, but just so you know, this is an array, and this is the variable of string arrays. Okay, so I said I talk about this command line arguments. It uses a useful name, args, which means more than one, could be one, but it tells us that this means arguments. What you can do when you're at the command prompt, you can type Java, some options, and your main class, which would be Hello World in this case, and you can pass in variables from the command line. Now, that's not something that is done commonly today, since most of our programs are GUI environments, so we really don't pass things from a command line. We actually compile and create a runnable jar file, which can be an icon on your desktop, and we just click it and it'll open up the application. I may demonstrate that at some point in the series just so you can see it, but it's really not important here. So just so you know, arguments can be passed in from the command line when you run this Java program. Okay? You can pass in arguments. Let me get through this, and then I may show how to create that command line just so you'll know, since I mentioned it. In Java or in NetBeans here, it gives you keys to tell you what goes where. This is code application logic here. So basically, this is where you put all the information. See, so this is where we put the code to begin running Hello World. And I think I mentioned it in another module when I was talking about the file types. This is where everything begins inside of the main method. And here we can call out to other classes, and that's how you would call those other classes into your program. But again, that's beyond the scope of this series, but just to bring that around and to kind of tie that up when I talked about class files. So here we go. This is the Hello World program. I can only say that this works in NetBeans, but it does not work in Eclipse. I've tried it. If I type SOUT and hit the tab key, it will complete this statement for me. And it stands system.out.println. Now, this is considered a system method of object system. And this can also have an in designation, which means it's coming in, and you will see that later. Not right now, and I will show that later, it being in. But this is how you get messages out to the console, which is down here. This is the console down here. Remember, we haven't covered variables yet, but inside of this system.out, you could print numbers or strings, or you can concatenate them, which I will talk about later, so you'll know how to read that too. So when you see double quotes, that means it should be a string. So I can say, since this is the Hello World, I can say Hello World, if I can spell it right, from reading Java code, not a big or little, code series. We have no error messages here. So therefore, all we have to do to get this run to see if it works is this. We go up here and click run. I talked about this in the IDE earlier when I talked about the IDEs or the integrated development environments, how to run. I'm going to click run and you're going to see this here appear down here. Hello World from Reading Java Code Series. Now, just to show that it did run, I'm going to add from UMUC. Click run again, and as you can see, from UMUC. This area down here is called the console. When you are debugging a program, you will find it prints out everything down here. Your error messages, your system out commands, your system out print line, everything we print it down here. There's another way to print things in a form or in a pop-up window, but again, that is beyond the scope of this series. So this is the Hello World program explained in its entirety. So that is as simple as programs can get. Programs get more complex because they have variables, objects, and other moving parts. So I'm going to pause here and see if I can bring up that command line to describe what it would look like to run this program. Here we are back live, reading Java code. We're doing a sample code simple program, Hello World. And as I said, I would show you how to run this in the command prompt. I'm not going to actually run it, but I'm going to type the commands. My system isn't fully configured to actually run, but this is command prompt. So what I would have to do, I know where I saved this. I saved it at that location there. So what I need to do is navigate to there. So I would do this. And I would go to the Hello World folder. And we see we have folders under there. The file I'm interested in is sitting in SRS, which is source. That's what I want to compile. So I would change to source. And I would run this command here, Java. Hello World .java to compile this. Now hit enter. Oh, I spelled it wrong. It would help if I spelled it right. I use a capital letter. I should have used lowercase letter. It is case sensitive. So if I hit it now, it should have compiled, and maybe I'm in the wrong folder. At any rate, I will have to work that out, but you would simply do this to run it. I talked about passing in command prompts. You would do that, and you would say pass in, if you want to pass in a name, you could pass in John. It would be in the list. That would be considered a command line argument to this program. So again, I just covered how to write a program, how to read it, and how to decipher the lines. We will now move on to Module 3. Thank you.